Welcome to the Corinne True Center for Baha'i History. The center was established by the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States in January of 2024. Its purpose is to foster the study of Baha'i history, Baha'i sacred texts, Baha'i philosophical and theological concepts, and world religions from a Baha'i and comparative perspective. I am Robert Stockman, director of the center, and joining me today is Marco Oliveira, who is a Portuguese Baha'i living in Lisbon, Portugal. He was born into a Catholic family and accepted the Baha'i Faith in 1984. He's married, has 2 children, and works as a software engineer. He attended the Religious Sciences course at the Catholic University of Lisbon and is the author of the blog Povo de Baha, People of Baha. The deep study of Baha'i themes and the study of scripts and theology have been his passions. In recent years, he's devoted special attention to the study of Christian themes from a Baha'i perspective. This is his 3rd webinar with us on the Greek philosophers. The first one, of course, was on Socrates. The second one was about Plato, and today we are covering Aristotle. This, of course, is their chronological order of when they lived and who influenced whom. So we will now hear about Aristotle, whose ideas very much impacted the sort of background of the Baha'i faith and were used extensively by Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha in their texts as well. So, Marco, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And I will now turn my camera and microphone off, put your slideshow up, and turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you. So thank you everyone for being here. As Robert said, this is the 3rd presentation on Greek thinkers. We had 2 previous presentations on Socrates and Plato. As you know, the Western world has its cultural roots in the Greek-Roman world. And in the Baha'i writings, we can easily find references to ancient Greek philosophers. Therefore, it is worth exploring the parallels between the Baha'i faith and the teachings of the ancient Greek philosophers. This is an example of a reference to ancient Greek philosophers. Here, Abdu'l-Baha explains why we still talk about their teachings.
The philosophers of Greece, such as Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, and others, were devoted to the investigation of both natural and spiritual phenomena. In their schools of teaching, they discoursed upon the world of nature as well as the supernatural world. Today, the philosophy and logic of Aristotle are known throughout the world. Because they were interested in both natural and divine philosophy, furthering the development of the physical world of mankind as well as the intellectual, they rendered praiseworthy service to humanity. This was the reason of the triumph and survival of their teachings and principles.
So, in this session, we'll focus our attention on Aristotle. Aristotle, to whom Baha'u'llah refer as the well-known man of knowledge. Aristotle that is mentioned, I believe, 11 times in the Baha'i writings we have translated to English so far. And the purpose of this presentation is to take a brief look at the teachings and main ideas of Aristotle and how they relate to the Baha'i teachings. So this is not a philosophical essay or in-depth study of Aristotle. My purpose here is to show that many of the ideas of this well-known man of knowledge that are at the origin of our Western cultural values, they are also somehow validated by the Baha'i faith. And I hope that at the end of this presentation, Baha'is will be curious about Aristotle and realize that his texts are worth reading. We are still talking about Aristotle. We are still talking about ancient Greek philosophers. But we don't talk about kings and rulers that lived in their days. We don't even remember their names. And Abdu'l-Baha mentioned this in one of his talks in the United States in 1912. He said the following:
"The Greek and Roman kingdoms, with all their grandeur, passed away. The ancient sovereignties of the Orient are but memories, whereas the power and influence of Plato and Aristotle still continue. Even now, in schools and universities of the world, their names are revered and commemorated. But where do we hear the names of bygone kings extolled?"
So, who was Aristotle? In general, the details about Aristotle's life are not well established. This is because biographies written in ancient times were often speculative, and historians today only agree in a few salient points. We know that Aristotle was born in 384 before the Common Era in the city of Stagira, that was close to Macedonia. He was probably the youngest of three siblings. At the age of 13, his parents died. At the age of 17, he entered Plato's academy in Athens, where he lived for 20 years. He later tutored Alexander, who would become Alexander the Great, and after that, he founded his own school in Athens, the Lyceum. Aristotle is considered one of the most prestigious Greek thinkers of the classic era and one of the greatest figures in Western history. He caused a deep influence in St. Thomas Aquinas and the entire scholastic school and tradition. And in the Islamic world, his influences are obvious in Avicenna, Al-Ghazali, and Averroes. We can put Aristotle's life in a timeline like this. So, as I said, he was born in Stagira. At the age of 17, joins Plato's academy in Athens. He stays there for 20 years and then leaves and goes to Assos in Asia Minor. Later, he moves to the island of Lesbos, where he marries Pythias. And 1 year later, he's called to Pella to tutor Alexander. 12 years later, back to Athens. Some years later, he leaves Athens, goes to Caucasus, where he dies. During his life, there were world events that are worth mentioning. King Philip II became king of Macedonia. King Philip, who destroyed Aristotle's hometown in 348. And it's curious that 10 years later, in recognition for Aristotle's work as tutor to Alexander, Philip II ordered the rebuild of Stagira and allowed the inhabitants to return to the city. This is the geographic world of Aristotle. As I said, he was born here, up here in the city of Stagira, moved to Athens, to Plato's academy in Athens. Later, he goes to Asia Minor, and then to the island of Lesbos, and then he's called to Pella to tutor Alexander. And some years later, comes back to Athens, where he founds his own school. And maybe a decade later, he goes to the island of Caucasus, where he dies. Aristotle had a wide range of interests, and he developed an extensive knowledge. He was a pioneer in many fields, and he was the first to organize many subjects we study today. After Plato's death, his thought developed his own ideas. Most of his writings were working documents, that is, class notes for his students. These documents were not meant for the public, unlike Plato's works. However, these writings are considered a literary genre, that is the treatise, and they became a standard way of doing philosophy. We can categorize Aristotle's writings in 3 periods. The first period, when he was living in Plato's academy in Athens. In this period, his thinking follows much of Plato's philosophy. There's a second period when he leaves the academy and he begins to systematize and organize his own thinking. And then a third period when he returns to Athens. The writings from this third period can be categorized in the following categories: logic, metaphysics, scientific works, ethics and politics, and aesthetics. Most of his preserved works belong to this third period. His texts cover an impressive diversity of topics: physics, biology, metaphysics, ethics, logic, rhetoric, poetry, economics, politics, and governance. Unfortunately, we only have 1/3 of his texts. It is said that in 1641, with the arrival of the Arabs to the city of Alexandria, there wasn't much left of the great library. It is said that most of the books then were mostly Christian books. And there is a legend that says that the Caliph ordered all books to be burned, except those containing text by Aristotle. This is a legend, but is a legend that shows us that since the early days, the Arabs had a great respect for Aristotle. In the 12th and in the 13th centuries, there was in Europe a renewed interest in Aristotle, and translations were made from Arabic and Greek. And then came the Renaissance, and thinkers like Copernicus and Galileo and Descartes stopped questioning many of his teachings. And then we have the scientific revolution, and many philosophers and scientists couldn't avoid talking about Aristotle and his teachings. Boole accepted his ideas on logic. Charles Darwin praised his contribution to biology, and Russell criticized his logic, but he acknowledged that Aristotle made progress over the early thinkers. This same Bertrand Russell claimed once that almost every serious intellectual advance has had to begin with an attack on some Aristotelian doctrine. That is to say that Aristotle is an unavoidable figure to modern philosophers. So, ethics. Aristotle wrote 3 great texts on ethics: Great Ethics, Eudemian Ethics, and Nicomachean Ethics. In this text, he presents an evolution of ethics, where the warrior's virtues are replaced by social virtues. That is to say that the use of force is replaced by the use of words. He defined an ethical model based on the idea of virtue, known as the golden mean. The golden mean is the moral balance between excess and efficiency. And in his book, Nicomachean Ethics, he lists several virtues that lead to happiness. And among these virtues, there is courage, moderation, generosity, magnificence, magnanimity, patience, kindness, truthfulness, joviality, and justice. Virtues, according to Aristotle, are fully achieved when we avoid both excess and efficiency. This table allows us to easily understand the concept of golden mean. In the mid column, you have virtues. On the left column, you have deficiency of those virtues, and the right column, the excess of those virtues. So for a virtue like courage, its deficiency is cowardice. Its excess is rashness. A virtue like generosity, its deficiency is stinginess or miserliness, and its excess is extravagance. A virtue like honesty, its deficiency is secrecy, its excess is loquacity, A virtue like self-control, its deficiency is indecisiveness, while its excess is impulsiveness. This golden mean is one of Aristotle's most famous proposals. And in the book Nicomachean Ethics, he mentions several virtues that one should acquire. He says the following.
Virtue, then, is of two sorts: virtue of thought, like wisdom, comprehension, intelligence, and virtue of character, like generosity, temperance, courage, justice. Virtue of thought arises and grows mostly from teaching, and hence needs experience and time. Virtue of character, of ethos, results from habit, ethos, hence its name ethical, slightly varied from ethos. Hence it is also clear that none of the virtues of character arises in us naturally.
So according to Aristotle, we must develop virtues of character. Just a side note, I hope one day there'll be Baha'i studying this book, Nicomachean Ethics, and making studies and presentations on this book from a Baha'i perspective. I'll leave you, for all of you, as a challenge. Now, when we hear these words of Aristotle on the acquiring virtues, we immediately start establishing a relation to the Baha'i teachings. In the Baha'i writings, we find a lot of exhortations to the acquisition of virtues, because virtues led humans to excellence, to perfection. These are words of Abdu'l-Baha, where he mentions several virtues we should acquire.
Other attributes of perfection are to fear God, to love God by loving his servants, to exercise mildness and forbearance and calm, to be sincere, amenable, clement and compassionate, to have resolution and courage, trustworthiness and energy, to strive and struggle, to be generous, loyal, without malice, to have zeal and a sense of honor, to be high-minded and magnanimous, and to have regard for the rights of others. Whoever is lacking in these excellent human qualities is defective.
So I think most of us will assume that by reading these two quotations, that there is an obvious parallel between the Baha'i teachings and the Aristotelian teachings concerning virtues. And there is a special virtue for Aristotle, that is justice. He considers it the most perfect virtue. And in his writings, justice can mean following the law, that is a sense of legality, or being fair, a perception of justice. Justice is special because justice has no excess or deficiency. One either is fair or unfair. Justice has only one opposite, that is injustice. In the book Politics, he wrote the following words concerning justice and the importance of justice.
For man, when perfected, is the best of animals, but when separated from law and justice, he is the worst of all. Since armed injustice is the more dangerous, and he is equipped at birth with the arms of intelligence and with moral qualities which he may use for the worst ends. Wherefore, if he have not virtue, he is the most unholy and the most savage of animals, and the most full of lust and gluttony. But justice is the bond of men and states, and the administration of justice, which is the determination of what is just, is the principle of order in political society.
I believe that when Baha'is hear these words of Aristotle on justice, they immediately smile and found a parallel with the Baha'i teachings. And of course, the very first quotation of the Baha'i writings that comes to our mind are these words of Baha'u'llah on the hidden words, where he says the following.
The best beloved of all things in my sight is justice. Turn not away therefrom if thou desirest me, and neglect it not that I may confide in thee. By its aid thou shalt see with thine own eyes, and not through the eyes of others, and shalt know of thine own knowledge, and not through the knowledge of thy neighbor. Ponder this in thy heart, how it behoveth thee to be. Verily, justice is my gift to thee, and the sign of my loving kindness. Set it then before thine eyes.
Now, virtues lead to happiness, and happiness is also an important topic for Aristotle. According to Aristotle, we need to live a virtuous life, and that will lead us to happiness. And to achieve this, one needs to live in moderation, to have free time, to make good friends. This concept of Aristotelian happiness doesn't come from pleasure or honors because these are unstable. Happiness should be lasting, and nothing is more lasting, according to Aristotle, than understanding and studying moral principles with intelligence. And through intelligence, humans approach God because intelligence is like a divine seed in us, a seed that connects this material world with the transcendent world. We as humans, we are social creatures. We cannot live alone. So we humans, we naturally tend to develop social relationships. And in these social relationships, Aristotle defines three types of friendship. Friendship of utility, that is based on social recognition and honors. This is, of course, a fragile and a short-lived friendship. Friendship of pleasure, that is based on seeking pleasure. This is also fragile friendship. And then friendship of virtue, a friendship between equals who are equally virtuous. This, according to Aristotle, is a lasting friendship. Aristotle emphasizes the need of equality in friendship because he believes that inequalities can lead to subordination and dependence. This third type of friendship, friendship of virtue, is the one, according to Aristotle, that leads to happiness. And concerning friendship, he writes the following in the book Nicomachean Ethics.
A perfect friendship is the friendship of men who are good and alike in virtue. For these wish well alike to each other qua good, and they are good themselves. Now those who wish well to their friends for their sake are most truly friends. For they do this by reason of own nature and not incidentally. Therefore their friendship lasts as long as they are good, and goodness is an enduring thing.
And concerning friendship and true friends, Abdu'l-Baha writes the following.
True friends are even as skilled physicians, and the teachings of God are as healing balm, a medicine for the conscience of man. They clear the head, so that a man can breathe them in and delight in their sweet fragrance. They waken those who sleep. They bring awareness to the unheeding, and a portion to the outcast, and to the hopeless, hope.
Now, there is a difference here between the Baha'i teachings and the Aristotelian teachings concerning friendship. There is nothing in the Baha'i writings about equality in friendship, or any suggestion stating that inequalities disturb true friendship. Okay, so we find a little difference here. Now, Aristotle focused much attention on personal conduct, that is ethics, and also the relationship between humans and the polis, the city, and that relation he calls the politics. Being social creatures, humans live in communities. Could be villages, neighborhoods, cities. Cities is or the polis, as polis is the Greek word for city. In communities, we develop our own sociability. And language makes human sociability complex. And rationality and morality add to that, this complexity. And it is in the polis, in the city, that you see the complexity of that sociability. Aristotle stated that we are citizen animals because of the intensity we live those relationships. For Aristotle, ethics and politics are inseparable. Every citizen should follow ethical values and be part of the polis, and all politics should serve citizens. The city's goal and sign of success is collective happiness. So, how should the city, the polis, be ruled? What could be the best system to rule a city? Before Aristotle, Plato proposed a political model for the best possible regimes. Aristotle identified the existing regimes in Greek cities and tried to describe which were the least harmful. He understood that power in the cities could be exerted by one person, by few persons, or by many persons. And these three types of government could have a perfect form, serving the common good, or a degenerate form, serving the interest of the rulers. So when you have the rule of one in its perfect form, serving common good, you have monarchy. But that can degenerate and becomes a system that serves the interest of that one ruler. When you have the rule of the few, in its perfect form, serving the common good, you have aristocracy. But that can degenerate and become oligarchy, where these few rule only based on their interests. And when you have the rule of many, in that perfect form, you have what Aristotle called the politeia. That we can translate as a constitutional regime, a system serving the common good. But that system can degenerate and become a democracy. Democracy here meaning demagogy, where the rulers manipulate the people and try to serve only their interests. According to Aristotle, the most virtuous classes should rule, but Aristotle knew this would be difficult. Concerning the forms of government, Aristotle wrote the following in the book Politics.
Governments, which have a regard to the common interest, are constituted in accordance with strict principles of justice and are therefore true forms. But those which regard only the interest of the rulers are all defective and perverted forms, for they are despotic, whereas a state is a community of freemen.
Plato and Aristotle's proposals for political organization are a product of their own personal experiences based on what was happening in Greek cities in those days. So we shouldn't take them as a universal truth. In the Baha'i writings, we have guidelines to the creation of a new world order. And this new world order, as Shoghi Effendi said, this new world order can never be identified with any of the standard types of government referred to by Aristotle in his works. However, we can find in the Baha'i writings advices on the type of government and exhortations to the political representatives of the people. These are words of Baha'u'llah concerning the type of government nations could adopt. He says the following.
Although a republican form of government profiteth all the peoples of the world, yet the majesty of kingship is one of the signs of God. We do not wish that the countries of the world should remain deprived thereof. If the sagacious combine the two forms into one, great will be their reward.
And in a tablet to Queen Victoria, he exhorts the representatives of the people in every country. And he says this:
O ye members of assemblies in that land and in other countries, take you counsel together, and let your concern be only for that which profiteth mankind, and bettereth the condition thereof, if ye be of them that scan heedfully. Regard the world as the human body, which, though at its creation whole and perfect, hath been afflicted, through various causes, with grave disorders and maladies.
When Aristotle talks about politics, he pays much attention to the education of children. He believed that educating children should be a main goal of rulers, and that all children should receive the same education in order to receive differences between citizens. The state was responsible for children's education because children belong to the state. Even citizens didn't own themselves. The city owned the citizens. And Aristotle goes as far as saying that even reproduction was a service to the city. He argued that the state, before Aristotle, Plato argued that the state should control education, and Plato create detailed study plans. Now, Aristotle didn't go that far. He only set general guidelines for education of children because he considered that the definition of good and the best interest of each city would depend on time and place. So we can say that Plato's education model was more rigid and Aristotle more flexible. Now, there's a note that we should make here. Concerning the education of children and the having children by families, Aristotle made several recommendations of eugenic nature, like abandoning disabled children. Now, these teachings concerning abandoning disabled children, they have no parallel whatsoever in Baha'i teachings. Concerning education and the need of education to be public, Aristotle wrote the following.
And since the whole city has one end, it is manifest that education should be one and the same for all, and that it should be public and not private. Not as at present, when everyone looks after his own children separately and gives them separate instruction of the sort which he thinks best. The training in things which are of common interest should be the same for all. Neither must we suppose that any one of the citizens belongs to himself, for they all belong to the state, and are each of them a part of the state, and the care of each part is inseparable from the care of the whole.
In the Baha'i writings, we have a lot of exhortations and advices concerning the education of children. And these advices focus both on learned education and morals. These are words of Abdu'l-Baha concerning this topic.
Training in morals and good conduct is far more important than book learning. A child that is cleanly, agreeable, of good character, well behaved, even though he be ignorant, is preferable to a child that is rude, unwashed, ill-natured, and yet becoming deeply versed in all the science and arts. The reason for this is that the child who conducts himself well, even though he be ignorant, is of benefit to others, while an ill-natured, ill-behaved child is corrupted and harmful to others, even though he be learned. If, however, the child be trained to be both learned and good, the result is light upon light.
This is a painting, School of Aristotle, by Gustav Spangenberg, 19th century. Now, another topic on Aristotle's mind, physics and metaphysics. Aristotle explored many topics with great enthusiasm and dedication. He was curious, he was hardworking, he was careful to read everything on a subject before investigating it. He read so much that Plato called him the reader. And for Aristotle, studying physics, that is nature, studying nature, meant studying and explaining natural changes. He created a method of scientific analysis that can be used in various fields. He was the first to organize many of the subjects we study today. He divided knowledge into categories and subcategories like psychology, biology, politics, logic, chemistry, botany. There are modern authors that refer to Aristotle as the father of ancient physics. And when you see its wide range of interests, you can understand why Baha'u'llah referred to him as the well-known man of knowledge. Of course, there are several concepts in Aristotelian physics that are now considered outdated. For instance, the concept that the cosmos is a series of concentric spheres with the Earth at the center. The Earth being made of 4 elements: earth, air, fire, water. These elements would change and decay. The notion that bodies naturally stay at rest. And also other concepts like 4 types of changes in bodies, 3 types of knowledge, 4 causes of change. These are also considered outdated today. But there are things that are not outdated. For instance, he discovered that Earth was round by observing shadows during an eclipse. And in the Baha'i writings, we don't have scientific theories, but we have a Baha'i perspective on scientific development. These are words of Abdu'l-Baha concerning arts and sciences.
All the existing arts and sciences were once hidden secrets of nature. By his command and control of nature, man took them out of the plane of the invisible and revealed them in the plane of visibility. Whereas, according to the exigencies of nature, these secrets should have remained latent and concealed. According to the exigencies of nature, electricity should be a hidden, mysterious power. But the penetrating intellect of man has discovered it, taken it out of the realm of mystery, and made it an obedient human servant.
Now, science is an intellectual construction that we use to describe reality. It's based on observation, on experimentation, and on the systematic use of reason. Naturally, this construction evolves. And Aristotle was one of the first to make a systematic use of reason. Many of his scientific teachings are no longer valid, just as much of our scientific knowledge we have today when they cease to be valid. What we cannot do with the scientific knowledge is to transform it into a dogma. Aristotle's book, Metaphysics, explores the nature of reality and focuses on being and existence. And he tries to answer 3 questions. What is existence and what kinds of things are in the world? How can things exist and change at the same time? How can we understand this world? Aristotle said that everything is made of form and matter. He introduced the concepts of potentiality and actuality, meaning that everything can become something else. He talks about causality, and he identifies material, formal, efficient, and final causes. This concept is also present in the book Some Answer Questions, chapter 80. Aristotle also suggests that all things have a purpose or a goal. And of course, we have the concept of unmoved mover. Aristotle presented this concept, sometimes is also known as prime mover. This would be the uncaused source of all motion and change in the universe. The ultimate cause is eternal and unchanging. This ultimate cause initiates the chain of causation for all movement and all changes, and led everything from potentiality to actuality without itself being moved. This concept is also present in the Baha'i writings. Abdu'l-Baha mentioned it in a tablet to Dr. Forel.
We observe that motion without motive force and an effect without a cause are both impossible, that every being hath come to exist under numerous influences, and continually undergoeth reaction. These influences, too, are formed under the action of still other influences. Such a process of causation goes, and to maintain that this process goes on indefinitely is manifestly absurd. Thus, such a chain of causation must of necessity lead eventually to Him who is the ever-living, the all-powerful, who is self-dependent and the ultimate cause.
So, what can we say to conclude and summarize this presentation? Aristotle, like Socrates and Plato, he innovated human knowledge. The perspectives of these big three are interesting and are complementary. Their texts don't provide final answers. In fact, Aristotle offers many open questions and ideas for students and readers to complete or to answer. And maybe the best way to approach Aristotle texts as students or readers is to reflect, to question, to add our own thoughts, as if we were at the Lyceum, at his own school in Athens, 2,400 years ago, where we could question and criticize his speech at any time. And this is what I had to share with you today. I will share with you this document I'm using as a presentation. There are several resources on the internet that were helpful to build this presentation. Of course, these books were very helpful in understanding the Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, in particular these Nicomachean Ethics. It's really, really interesting. There are other resources on the internet that I also recommend. This video by Mikhail Sergeyev, Aristotle in the Baha'i Writings. Also this Baha'i Proofs of God by Jan Kuj. And there are several articles on Aristotelic topics, like these three I mentioned here. And this is what I had to share with you today. So thank you very much for your presence here and for your attention.
Thank you very much. This was fantastic, Marco. I really appreciated this review of Aristotle very much. I was not familiar with all of these details about him. And you could call him the founder of the idea of public education.
Yeah.
I had no idea. That's really interesting.
I don't know. He was the founder, but he strongly advocated.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if he wasn't actually able to establish it, of course, because they didn't have the ability at that time. But the fact that he thought of the idea and advocated the idea, I mean, he planted a seed for thousands of years that really didn't generate and become something a reality until the 19th century. And in some places, the 20th, and a few other places, the 21st, actually, come to think of it. So that's really quite amazing. Somewhere a long time ago, I heard that his nickname was Beta, because he was the second best in absolutely everything in the world. If not, of course, the best in some things too, but his knowledge, broad knowledge, was such that it was just very impressive.
Yeah, I haven't heard that story before.
Yeah, it may have been actually applied to Plato, but I think it was Aristotle.
Yeah.
So that
really makes sense.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
Really quite interesting. Said asks the question, Abdu'l-Baha stated that Greek philosophers, including Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, learned from the sages and prophets of the Jewish people. Is there any historical records of such interactions?
We know that Aristotle would, when he lived in Athens, he would go to the port and ask sailors and owners of big shipping companies who traveled to Phoenicia or Egypt that whenever they could, to buy books from those foreign lands. I read somewhere that he even had some Hindu books. Okay. It's not, therefore, it's not surprising to me that he had some Hebrew books with him, and of course that somehow he was influenced by those books. It's something we cannot discard. I would say it's very likely.
Mm-hmm. I understand also that when Alexander the Great went off doing his conquering, he sent plant samples and other things back to Aristotle. So even then, you had the world's greatest general building the world's first huge empire, who of course had been his student, and was also providing with information. So that's a good answer. I hadn't heard about Hindu books. I'll have to see if I can find anything about that. Christine says, thank you, Marco. Very interesting. Sio Mac says, great presentation. Very much enjoyed this. It seems he had good morals and virtues. The morals and virtues were important to him. Was there any relation in him about God? The concept of first cause was mentioned by him, but did he mention anything about prayers and a personal relationship to the first cause?
The point is that before us, the Christians also found Aristotle's teachings very appealing, and naturally, we also find it very appealing. For what I read so far, I'm not sure if we can describe Aristotle as a monotheist or a religious person like Christians or Baha'is. If he was religious, he would be religious according to his time. He would follow some religious practice. But I tend to be careful on these attempts to create a Christian Aristotle, and of course we should avoid to create a Baha'i Aristotle. Okay, this would be a construction. Okay,
that's a good point. As I understand it too, when you compare him to Plato was much more amenable to monotheism than Aristotle. Yes. Plato very much believed in a kind of, shall we say, a mirror image of physical creation in the next world, whatever you want to call it. And Aristotle tended not to go in that direction. And as a result, early Christian theology was based extensively on Plato, and Aristotle was actually out of favor for a while. So it wasn't until the Muslims discovered Aristotle that he was then used to build a monotheistic theology. And in fact, what I heard once, and I'd have to hunt it up to see where I heard it, I think it was actually a class lecture, was that when Aristotle was translated into Arabic, they thought they were translating Plotinus. Plotinus, of course, was a Neoplatonist and was much more theistically inclined than Aristotle was. But because they thought that these texts were by Plotinus, they understood Plotinus as having these very concrete, clear understandings of the physical world, as well as accepting the next world. And so the Muslims were quite happy to use these Aristotelian texts in their theology. And then, of course, Aquinas got that idea from the Avicennas.
From those translations,
Yeah, that's what I've heard at any rate. Saeed also asks, where do we find the other two previous presentations on Socrates and Plato? And the answer to that is go to youtube.com/@CorinTrueCenter. And they're right there. You can also go to CorinTrueCenter.com, click on webinars, and you get a list of all our webinars, and then you can click right there on those particular webinars because they're available in they're in video form. They're also available as podcasts, and fairly soon we'll have them available as transcripts as well, because we have a volunteer who's taking the closed captioning and creating a transcript for us from it. I'm curious about the all this material you gave about ethics, but also about education and about government. Is all of that found in the Nicomachean Ethics?
Concerning virtues is there.
Mhm.
Concerning the ones on education is on politics, and the book Politics. Okay.
Oh, that's in politics. Okay. Yeah, now I've gotten more and more interested in actually reading Aristotle sometime.
Yeah.
Let's see if we have any other questions here. I don't see any other questions right offhand. But we've had some really good questions from our audience. I'm pleased about
the point I think it's we were talking before this session. We find so much similarities between the Baha'i teachings with the Greek classic thinkers that I came to the conclusion that the roots of the Baha'i Faith extend not only to previous previous world religions, but also to the classic Greek world. And that is to say that the Baha'i Faith is close to my spiritual roots, because I was born a Catholic, but it's also close to the roots of my cultural identity. And the perception I got from my cultural identity, it's much deeper and widened because of this proximity. Just like my understanding of my spiritual identity is much deeper and wider because of its cultural roots into other religions.
I think you're quite right, because any manifestation of God, their revelation has to be based on the ideas that already exist. They'll take the existing ideas, endorse some of them, reject some of them, modify some of them. They'll take existing vocabulary, they'll add new words, they'll change the meanings of old words. So they're always building on the foundation of what has come before. And the Greek philosophers provided an incredibly powerful foundation, intellectual foundation for building religious ideas. And all of the three monotheistic religions have interacted with them. Even Judaism under Philo of Alexandria, who was an ancient Jewish philosopher, he was very much a Neoplatonist, or maybe he was a Middle Platonist. He certainly was quite aware of the Greek philosophers and their ideas, and used them as well in his philosophy. So they all have. Saeed asks, do you have any advice how to use the relations between the Greek philosophers and the Baha'i teachings in teaching the faith to others?
Well, the first thing is, when you start talking about Plato, Socrates, or Aristotle, most people think, oh, it's going to be a boring talk, or some philosopher talk that no one really understands exactly what he's saying. I would say go step by step. Talk about ethics. Talk about even if you want to talk about politics. Politics in those days of Plato and Aristotle, the Greek cities were in turmoil. Even a democratic and high-minded and high cultural, high intellectual city like Athens was defeated by the militaristic Sparta. Yeah. And the regime that followed was very weak and felt everything was a threat. Even Socrates was considered a threat and was killed.
Yeah.
And and so the philosophers had to think, okay, so how can we overcome this crisis? We are coming into a parallel crisis. The regimes seem to weaker. The quality of governance is also weakening. Maybe we have to do some reasoning, like these big three philosophers did. Not to make some political statements in the sense of political partisanship, but in the sense, how can we rule our countries in order to best serve common good? And that was their concern. It should be our concern. We have advices in the writings concerning that, as I showed you. But I would say go subject by subject. You'll find it will be easier, shorter, smaller doses.
Yeah, there was something that you said in your presentation that really struck me, that politics flows from ethics, or your ethical position drives your political positions. And of course, one's faith, one should drive one's ethics.
Yeah.
I've had several of my students at university ask me, why can't religion just be private? Why does it have to interfere with the public? Why does it have to stand up and speak about things in the public? Why can't it just be private? Well, the answer obviously is that if your faith has ethical positions, if you have ethical positions, then you have concerns about politics. Politics in that broad sense of the managing the social
community.
So that I think that comment was very helpful, in particular, that you made. Mary also said, learned a lot. Thank you. So I don't see any other questions, and right offhand, I can't think of anything else to mention. So it sounds like we lost at least half of all of his writings, maybe 2/3 of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really, really a shame. There is a villa in Pompeii where they found, yes, they found 500 manuscripts that have been converted into charcoal, but the pages are still intact. Yeah. And they're coming up with ways to use computer driven tomography to find the extra layer of ink that's carbonized. And who knows, maybe we'll find some Aristotelian texts there. Apparently they were mostly about logic, apparently.
Yeah.
So
a lot of historians and philosophers excited about such possibilities. It's tremendous.
Yeah, let's hope in the next 20 or 30 years they develop that software so they can essentially unroll the scrolls.
Yes.
They haven't been able to do it any other way. Well, people are saying thank you very much, and I also join them in thanking you for this marvelous presentation. To wrap things up today from the Corinth Center for Baha'i History, excuse me here. We have 3 more webinars coming up for the rest of 2025, only one of which has actually been scheduled in terms of a day, but we'll have them all scheduled fairly soon, probably in October. Najati Al-Khan is going to be speaking about the secret of divine civilization, because this is the 150th anniversary of its publication in 1875. And so we're going to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the publication of the secret of divine civilization by having a presentation about it. Then in November, probably the 30th, Catherine Hoganson, of course, who's the author of the recent biography of Horace Holly, is going to be speaking about the fact that this year, 2025, is the 100th anniversary of Shoghi Effendi recognizing the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States and Canada as a national spiritual assembly. There are, of course, bodies that pre-existed all the way back to 1909, which were the national or continental coordinating bodies of sorts. But it was in 1925 that the Guardian actually recognized it as a national spiritual assembly. And she's going to talk about that. Then finally, I think it's December 7th, Paul Hanley will be speaking about Abdu'l-Baha's efforts to establish the village of Adasiya in the Jordan River Valley, and encouraging the Baha'is there in their agriculture and in their social development. So this will be a chance to look at Abdu'l-Baha as a community builder and as a sustainable development expert as well. So we have a lot of very exciting subjects coming up the rest of this year. And again, I want to thank everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you then. Goodbye until then.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Let me get this video going. I think this one. Nope. Hold on. Where'd it go? It's this.